I'm Pam Osmond, and this presentation is about using the teaching learning cycle to develop a writing lesson. Now, the teaching learning cycle is just a teaching approach or methodology. You'll see it used in several different contexts. You'll come across it in teaching numeracy, but it's usually used in terms of a writing lesson. So, what's the teaching learning cycle? We start with building the field, which is just another word for the introduction. Then modelling or deconstructing the kind of text type that you're talking about. And then we do a joint construction. You show the students how to do it by doing it together with them, and then they go on to independent construction. So the important features of the teaching learning cycle are that there's a great deal of talk about the text and the topic before you send them off to do some independent writing. The emphasis is on the pre-writing stage. That's where all the hard work is done. You use a lot of scaffolding in that pre-writing stage, and gradually it's withdrawn until the independent stage. So the lesson that we're going to be talking about today is a workplace accident report. So our lesson objective might read something like, at the end of the lesson, students will be able to write a workplace accident report using appropriate text features. First of all, building the field. Now, we're doing two things when we're building the field for any text type, really. We talk about the context of the topic, or what you're going to be writing about. And by looking at the purpose and audience of the text, we also look at the general text type, or how are you going to write it. So by the purpose and the audience of this text, it's going to be written for maybe it's if you're witnessing an accident, your report might end up in court. So the purpose may well be a legal one. So that might be your audience. So first of all, building the field. At this stage, you might show a video clip or a picture of a workplace accident, or you might read a newspaper report or a text written in another genre. It might be a little story about a workplace accident. You might tell them a story about a workplace accident, or you might share stories in the group about workplace accidents. And then, what happens next and why? So, you've witnessed all these workplace accidents. Somebody comes up and says, "Can I have a statement about what you saw?" So you're giving an accident report. And why? Well, as we talked about, it could end up being a legal document. And at the very least, it will be used by the boss or the OH&S people to say, well, we can avoid that accident in the future. So it will have a use. It won't just be looked at and thrown in the garbage. So we're eliciting information regarding the necessity for an accident report, its purpose and its audience. The next stage is the modelling and deconstructing of the text. When you're doing any sort of writing, you need to give your students a model, even if it's something that you think is really simple. Give them a model, show them what somebody else has written and the way they've written it. So at this stage, we might share one or more models of the text of an accident report. And it's important at this stage to develop an understanding, as we said, of the social function and the purpose of the text. And developing an understanding that the overall organisation and features of the text is functional, that it's written the way it is for a particular reason. So this is the text that we're going to be looking at. This is the model. This is taken from the resource that's on your LibGuide called Write Ideas. So we look at the sections of this accident report. There's the details of the witness, details of the accident, and the signature down the bottom. So now we're looking at the text features on that text. For example, you might point out that we need the full details up here. Just Joe isn't going to do it up there because other people will be looking at it. And what are the text features of the text? read it through with them, and they'll discover that we've got the full details of what happened step by step, steps separated by a nice bit of white space. You've got the full names and job titles of anybody who's mentioned. Remember, a third person has to look at it. We notice that we've got verbs in the past tense. So with this, you might say, all right, let's pick out all the verbs, and you write them on the board and notice that they're all in the past tense. They end in ed, or it's there was, nobody, I was, and so on. So you deconstruct the text and work out what the text features are. We write only what you saw or heard, not your opinion. So he appeared to be in pain. We can't say he was in pain, we don't know. We can say he appeared to be in pain. And the details have to be as exact as possible, and sometimes you're asked to draw a diagram. Proper full sentences with standard punctuation, not just dot points and dashes and so on. And you need to sign it. Now, it's often useful when you're talking about text features to look at a text type that has different text features but talks about the same topic. For example, we might imagine that Joe has gone off and written an informal email to his mate telling him about this accident. And look at the text features of this. We don't have full sentences. This one just in a world of pain. So there's no full sentences. There's his opinion. He spends all his time horsing around. Today he got what was coming to him. So you can highlight the text features of the text you're wanting them to focus on by looking at what it's not. So we've dealt with this phase, we've modelled the text and we've deconstructed the text type. The next phase is the joint construction. Now, at this stage, the teacher is going to work with the learners as a group to construct a similar text. You're going to model the writing process with the learners. So you have to set up another scenario by playing another video clip or role-playing an accident scenario or describing or reading a description. Somehow set up another scenario for them so that you can discuss it and write vocabulary on the board. The more they can talk about something before they have to write about it, the better. So you're also modelling the planning phase. You're making notes of important information on the board, and then you write the accident report on the board, or somehow, by negotiating the text with the students. What are we going to write first? What happened first, and so on, and you write it up all together. And then we need to edit what they've written on the board. So have another look. Does this really how it happens step by step, or do we need to move this bit up there, or whatever? Using an editing checklist. Now I'll talk about that at the end, but the students need to know all the way through what the criteria are that you think a good text looks like. Okay, so we've done the joint construction, and this is possibly your formative assessment stage also. While you're doing it all together, you can get an idea of whether they've really got the message about what the text feature should be. And if not, you might need to move back to do a bit more deconstructing of an earlier text. Okay, so we feel our students are ready to go on to the next independent construction, which by the way might be working in pairs or a little group to construct a text, but they're doing it, you're removing a little bit of the scaffolding for them. So you need to set up yet another scenario, another picture or video or something. So for this lesson, you need to have 3 separate scenarios ready. 3 different videos, or a video and a couple of stories, or whatever. So you're setting up yet another scenario. And again, plenty of talk about the scenario to elicit the appropriate vocabulary. To write up on the board, talk before writing, of course. And then when they've written it, then don't let them hand it over to you and say, is this all right? They have to edit it first, but they have to have some criteria against which to edit it, and giving them an editing checklist is really important for any sort of writing you ask your students to do. Um, there are some examples in the Write Ideas, resource, so have a look at that. Some teachers use a sort of a skeleton one that has the criteria that you use all the time, like spelling and punctuation, concise with no unnecessary words, and whatever, and then some that are particular to the particular um, text type that you're working on. So give them the editing checklist and let them have a look at that. All right? So that's really the end of this presentation, but have a look at the references that I've suggested. Again, Write Ideas will give you some models of other kinds of text types, and the text features to give you an idea of the kind of text features you might look at. Read through Jenny Hammond's teaching learning cycle that develops this idea in a little slightly fuller way. All right, so enjoy designing your lesson around the teaching learning cycle.